All right, welcome in everybody. This is the second part of our triathlon trifecta today. We just heard from Amanda Duke a few hours ago. And later today, we'll have a workout with Kyle Kuhn. But in between, it's my pleasure to introduce Amy Dixon to you all. Amy Dixon is a USA National Team paratriathlete. I don't want to spoil too much of her story ahead of her time, but Amy is the reigning aquathlon world champion, 7-time International Triathlon Union gold medalist, current U.S. national champion in both paratriathlon and paracycling time trials. An amazing athlete person that we're so lucky to get to spend time with today. While she is presenting, please pose your questions either on the Zoom or in the Facebook chat section, and we'll be sure to ask them to Amy when her presentation is finished. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Amy Dixon. Amy, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks, Bill, for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell us your story.
So I'm, as you know, I'm on the U.S. national team for paratriathlon. I've been on the national team since before the last Paralympics in Rio. I started the sport in 2013 as a way actually to lose weight. And triathlon was not initially on my radar. I was running with Achilles International in New York City and running on a treadmill at my local YMCA while holding on to the bar and tying myself there with an elastic TheraBand. I have uveitis, which is an inflammatory autoimmune eye disease, which is how I lost most of my vision. I've got about 2% of usable vision right in dead center, so extreme tunnel vision. And so the treatment for that was high dose steroids, and I gained 70 pounds as part of the treatment. So I was a former swimmer back in high school, rode horses competitively, played soccer, was on the tennis team, was actually on the equestrian team in college, and really wanted to get back to feeling like myself. And so I started doing some spin classes at my local YMCA, and I got back in the pool. And you can see, for those of you that can see it, my background is actually my guide dog, my former guide dog, Elvis, giving me a big wet kiss poolside while I'm at the edge of the pool. And so I got back in the pool, started swimming, biking, and running indoors. And Carolyn Gaynor, who I'm sure many of you know, she's the guide of guides for those of us who are involved in paratriathlon or in running. She was living in New York at the time and volunteered to guide me for my first race back in 2013 for a local sprint distance triathlon. And I had so much fun. We were on a borrowed bike that was about 65 pounds. It was made of steel. It was way too big for both of us. And we had so much fun that first day. And I was so excited to have the title of triathlete, that you're officially a triathlete when I finished the race. So I immediately signed up for New York City Triathlon, which is an Olympic distance race, only a month later. And again, really enjoyed the experience. And through Challenge Athlete Foundation, I got a grant to travel out to San Diego to participate in one of their paratriathlon development camps, and got a little bit of coaching. Carolyn and I actually signed up after I got invited by USA Paratriathlon to an athlete development camp in Baltimore, Maryland. I met actually some of my current teammates there. Little did I know that I was going to become part of the national team at that time. I literally was doing it for fun, to lose weight, to meet people, to start getting involved in the visually impaired community, and got a little bit faster, finished on the podium at my first Pan American Championships, and made the national team back in, I think, 2015 or 16. And I've been on the national team since, except for 1 year gap year in there. And it's just an amazing experience. I love the sport of paratriathlon and everything it's done for me.
And that's fantastic, Amy. Thanks for sharing that stories. You mentioned being, such a well-rounded athlete yourself. You mentioned tennis and equestrian. What really drew you to paratriathlon?
Honestly, like as you heard, it was kind of an accident. I started swimming because I was a former swimmer. I was biking because I thought the spin classes looked like a lot of fun, and I hated running historically because I wasn't very good at it, and I had really bad asthma, so it was a struggle for me. So I didn't necessarily get drawn to paratriathlon more than fall into it by, again, Carolyn Gaynor. She's a great recruiter for the sport. And so, yeah, I wasn't immediately drawn to it at all. And honestly, given my background, I probably would have preferred to go into equestrian sport or something like that. It would certainly be a lot easier than this sport. But what drew me to it was the people and the fact that you don't necessarily have to be good at any one particular discipline, all three disciplines. You can be an exceptional cyclist who can also bike or also swim and run well. You don't have to necessarily be amazing at all three disciplines. And so, we all have our weak leg, right? So I particularly enjoy cycling, and because it's the closest I can get to riding a horse. And I like to go fast.
Yeah, that's great. You say cycling is your favorite part or favorite aspect of it?
For sure. I mean, as somebody who used to drive cars, and I actually used to drive race cars sometimes on the track up at Lime Rock. I took some driving classes up there and really was addicted to speed. And I liked skiing fast. I liked going fast on my horse. I like driving fast. And so biking fast on a tandem is the closest I can get to it. And I have a beautiful custom carbon fiber Calfee tandem. It's the Ferrari of tandems. So every time I get on it, I just get excited to go out and ride.
Yeah. Well, what would you say is the aspect that requires the most work for you in the sport?
Certainly running, because I'm not a natural runner and I have really severe asthma. So it's, the breathing is really a struggle for me. It definitely is the hardest on your body, for sure. I'm a 44-year-old athlete. And so everything from your hips to your, calves, to your back, to your shoulders, really gets affected by running, and mechanics are so important. I love swimming, particularly because it's something that I've historically been good at and just really enjoy the water. And the fact that I'm in San Diego helps that I'm right next to the ocean.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ask you about your most memorable sport experience, both in paratriathlon and then maybe something you've experienced outside of the sport that is memorable for you.
I would say most memorable, well, gosh, there's so many great moments that I've had, but honestly, one of the funniest and also most rewarding was I raced in Portugal 2 years ago with my guide, Kirsten Sass. And we were actually there was one other American athlete, but she was independent. She wasn't on the national team or anything. So she kind of was traveling solo. And normally when we travel to World Cup races or World Series races, we've got a mechanic, we've got a physical therapist with us, we've got a dietitian, we have a sports psychologist, we've got Amanda Duke, we've got a team manager, we've got coaching staff. So we have our entourage with us. And so this was end of the season, basically after World Championships. So we were the only American athlete going, so we had no support staff. So I literally flew into a tiny island off the coast of Portugal, actually closer to Africa, called Madeira, beautiful island, and praying that my bike got there, because I literally was on a puddle jumper airplane that barely fit my tandem, let alone people, and get there. And I actually flew ahead of my guide because it was a last minute race. I had just finished the season and I was actually at a training camp in Colorado Springs, and Amanda was looking at my points on my for the season and said, hey, listen, if you do one more race and you do well, you actually can get your funding covered for next season, and then you don't have to worry about racing again at the beginning of next year, and you can take some time off. And I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, well, you're fit. You just did World Championships a week ago. Why don't you fly to Portugal next weekend? So literally with like 2 days notice, I flew back home from Colorado, grabbed my bike, threw your stuff together in a suitcase and flew to Portugal for the weekend, and got there again by myself. My guide arrived a day later because she actually had to work. We got there and it was a very, very challenging course. And normally we have spotters along the course to tell us whether we're in the lead, how many seconds back we are, or how many minutes back we are. So there's 3 levels of visual impairment in the sport of paratriathlon: B1, B2, and B3. B1 are athletes that have little to no eyesight whatsoever. B2 is partial sight, maybe they can see shapes and colors, and B3 is tunnel vision, essentially like mine. And so the B1 athletes get a 3-minute and 48-second head start on the B2 and B3 athletes. So sometimes it's hard to tell where you are placing wise in relation to these athletes because they start ahead of you. And because I'm visually impaired, I don't know if I've passed them in the swim or not. So, if I swim really, really fast, I can make up 3 minutes, but that's a lot of time to make up while swimming. And I knew I had an excellent swim, but I didn't know how good. I knew we passed some people, but I couldn't tell if they were men or women or who they were or what category they were in. And so we came out of the water and I had no idea, again, where we were. So I was just going as hard as I could. And we battled it out with a Russian athlete and a Ukrainian athlete, the entire bike. And it was like neck and neck and really exciting and terrifying and riveting the whole time and full gas. And then I get on the run and I'm completely exhausted. Like I just blew everything on the bike. And again, I didn't know where I was. And we were friends with the Danish coach. And he actually said, yelled out to us, 18 seconds. And I didn't know what 18 seconds meant. I don't know if we were ahead by 18 seconds, behind 18 seconds. So it was messing with my head and I'm just running for dear life. And all I can think of is like, I just want to walk because I was completely out of gas and had just exhausted myself. I just wanted to lay down on the sidewalk in the middle of the race. I was done. And Kirsten, my guide, is begging me to keep running. And we saw this girl from Denmark who was in front of, or the Netherlands, in front of us. And I knew that she was a fast runner and she had finished just off the podium in Rio. And so I couldn't tell if she was on the same lap as us, if she was a lap behind, a lap up. But all I knew was that if I wanted to finish on the podium, I needed to catch her. And so I caught her and it took everything I had and I kept my foot on the gas. And I remember going down the finishing chute onto the blue carpet and them raising the banner in front of me. And I was running next to a gentleman who was an amputee and he was missing his right leg from France. And I thought they were lifting the banner for him. I thought, oh, that's great. He won his category. That's so nice. I actually slowed down because I didn't want to steal his moment of him grabbing the banner. And I looked behind me to make sure there wasn't another blind athlete within, that would pass me in the finishing chute. And so there was nobody behind me for quite a distance. So it was safe for me to slow down. And then my guide says, no, I think that's actually for you. And I said, no, we couldn't have won. And I said, it's impossible. Like, I think we're a lap back. And so she goes, no, I think that's for us. And so they're like all yelling at me, but nobody spoke English because we're in Portugal. So they're trying to tell me to go. Down and I'm like after you to the amputee, and it was just really funny. It was this very funny moment. But so I ended up winning the race by quite a bit, and so I was kind of shocked because again I really thought I was so far back, and so it was one of those exciting and funny moments. And literally we were there for all of I think 72 hours in Portugal and then flew home. So it was well worth my while and a very exciting race.
Yeah, that sounds like what a nice surprise when you're out of
It was
gas.
a surprise win.
Right? Yeah, that's a fantastic story. What about any other sports whether it's attended or witnessed that have really been memorable in your life?
I have to say I attended the Boston Marathon. I don't know what year it was. I think it was the year before the bombing, if I'm not mistaken. Not positive, but it's one of the largest marathons, as you know, in the country for impaired athletes outside of California International Marathon. And Jason Romero, who I'm sure you're familiar with, is a visually impaired runner, and he's an ultra runner now, and incredible athlete. And there was a documentary that he had filmed. And again, I have decent vision centrally, so I can read and recognize faces. And a lot of the people that were in attendance of this we're having a documentary preview, like there was a little sneak peek before the Boston Marathon. And so they invited all the VI athletes to come see this film. And so they hadn't had time to do audio description for it yet. And so they asked if I would be kind enough to volunteer to be the describer. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've never done this before. And I was nervous because it was so much pressure. And my friend Randy, he's totally blind, Randy Pierce, he's a blind hiker. And he says, oh, you'll be fine. He's like, just if you see something on the screen, say it, just like you would, like your guides would say to you. I'm like, okay. So I sat there and I talked the whole movie and told everybody what was happening and what it looked like. And it ended up being really fun. And it was such an amazing experience for me because, my disease is degenerative and I'll be losing the rest of my sight over time. And so it was really inspiring to me to be able to do that for other athletes and also to understand from their perspective what it will be like for me eventually. And it was such a gift. It was such a gift that he asked me to do that. And so that was a really memorable moment being at the Boston Marathon and describing the film for everyone.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
I want you to share with our viewers, there was a piece I saw in the news about how your community kind of rallied around you when COVID took hold and helped you set up like almost a training gym in your garage. Talk a little bit about what your training regimen looked like before COVID, and then how you had to shift and what that community rallying around your training meant to you and how that all plays out in your training right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky. I moved to San Diego and I'm literally 200 yards from one of the largest YMCA's in the country. And the blessing of being in San Diego County is that all athletes with disabilities get free membership through the Children's Athlete Foundation through a grant. So I live next to this amazing pool. It's two 25-yard pools and a huge facility with lots of treadmills and weight equipment. And there's a running track outside, or a dirt running loop outside, and just a lot of great facilities for me. And I have I have a bike set up on a Wahoo Kicker trainer at home, so I'm able to do all of my cycling training indoors at home. So I do a lot of very specific training. So I don't run with guides very often, maybe once a week if possible. But a lot of my training's done on the treadmill or solo on that dirt loop that I know very well. And so I'm very reliant on the YMCA for their facilities. Especially I swim typically 6 days a week for about 90 minutes a day. And when COVID hit, that they shut down the pools, and so that became really challenging. And I actually was friends with a member of the YMCA, and she had a short pool, an 18-yard pool in her backyard, but it was a 2-lane lap pool, not ideal. And I still have scars on my knuckles from bloodying them from hitting the sides of the pool, because even with counting my strokes, the stucco, I had a really hard time visibility wise in that pool, but it was an option. So I was able to do some swimming, certainly not the speeds that I'm used to, but it was a way to keep some swim fitness. And then eventually, the pools opened up, I think July, and you pay, to go rent a lane for 45 minutes. And so that's been working out okay. And then, with the running was the biggest challenge for me, because again, I usually run with a guide or on the YMCA treadmills, but the YMCA was closed. So one of their suppliers heard about me through the local news and donated a commercial treadmill, which I now have in my garage. And that's been a godsend, because again, my runs are very specific, a lot of intervals and very targeted, either zones that I need to do. And that doesn't always align with a lot of my guides, because a lot of the guides that I run with, the faster I get, the more my guides are probably racing themselves, either training for Ironman races. So maybe our workouts don't align or with their coaches, with what their coaches set up for them. So I'm relegated to the treadmill. So I'm really lucky that I got a treadmill at home, and then I was able to just buy a bunch of weights and bands, and someone donated a bench to me. So I'm entirely set up with a gym in my garage that I can do all the exercises I need to do. And then the swimming, we can again rent lanes now, and I bike indoors on my Wahoo. So that hasn't changed. So it really has been actually pretty smooth for me.
Okay, great. Yeah, just want to once again encourage all the viewers to submit your questions for Amy, either in the Zoom or on Facebook, and we'll get those asked. But I do have a couple more for you, Amy. First one regarding role models. Do you have a role model in the sport of triathlon, and maybe one outside the sport?
Para or able-bodied?
Either.
Either. Gosh, so many just incredible athletes. I would say in the sport of triathlon, God, so many people that I look up to. I would say Alyssa Seeley, one of my teammates. She's an amputee. She's a PTS2, which is, so she's missing her leg, I think, below the knee, if I'm not mistaken. And she has very similar health challenges to myself, or hers are different, but she has very difficult health challenges outside of just being an amputee, that she manages to balance with training at the elite level. And that is really, really hard. I have to say, I had 5 doctor's appointments yesterday. My disease is very active right now. I have multiple surgeries that I have each year, and seeing Alyssa and how she manages her team of doctors, and sometimes she can't eat solid food, so she actually has a G tube or a ostomy in her stomach to have to feed through, but she still manages to travel and train at the elite level. And she's #1 in the world, has won world championships just about every year. And she's a Paralympic gold medalist. So I have to say her resilience and managing a tough disease while competing at the top level of sport is really inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, for sure.
And then outside of triathlon, I would say, again, Lindsey Vonn, the Olympic skier, is probably one of my heroes in sport. Again, Lindsey had multiple career-ending knee injuries. And as a skier, when you're traveling 70 miles an hour down a mountain, putting that much weight, especially your knees, your knees are so critical. And her knee was literally hanging on by one piece of cartilage, and any wrong move or crash would completely sever her leg. And she was determined to hit this record where she had the most World Cup wins of any female in history. And then she achieved that, and she wanted to beat the men, and she only needed to do 5 more races or win 5 more races. And the resilience and the courage and enduring that kind of physical pain for months on end was very inspiring and gut-wrenching to watch as an athlete, because that she's pushing her body beyond its capacities in order to achieve her dream.
Absolutely. Yeah, the common thread there is resiliency.
Resilience, absolutely.
And Lindsey,
yeah.
So, Amy, if you weren't a paratriathlete, what sport do you think you'd be doing right now?
That is very easy. Actually, the sport of para-equestrian. So it's something that I'm looking into for 2024. I've already spoken to the classifiers for that sport. I'm trying to get classified, but it's not easy because for those of you who are trying to get into this, either the sport of paratriathlon or any Paralympic sport, classification opportunities for visually impaired athletes are challenging because they don't have a lot of people qualified to test you. So sometimes you may have to fly to Australia or South Africa or somewhere in Europe where they have the classification process going on, which can be very expensive if you're not racing there or competing there. Just to go there to get classified is a pretty expensive little trip. So that's something I need to do over the next 2 years, is to get classified in that sport and see if I classify as a visually impaired athlete for para dressage. And I'd like to go for 2024.
Well, that would be a great story.
Yeah.
What a segue too.
And it's a little bit, honestly, I'm 44 years old. I'll be 45 in 2 months, and it's a little bit easier on my body. I love paratriathlon. My plan is, after Tokyo, is to maybe compete for another year if possible, depending upon how my body holds up, and continue. I coach a lot of visually impaired athletes, and so I'd like to continue with that and give back to the sport in that way. But finding a sport that's a little bit easier on my body sounds very appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking back, if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, say a 5 or 6-year-old Amy Dixon, what would you tell her?
To what age, Amy Dixon?
Let's say 5, 6-year-old Amy Dixon.
Oh gosh. I honestly, I would say, have fun, enjoy your sport, enjoy the different sports. I think it's what's made me a good athlete. That's, I started paratriathlon at the age of 37. So having a very diverse sports background that wasn't specific to one sport, I would say don't specialize. There's a great book that I just read called Range, and I forget the name of the author, but it talks about how children, when they, professional athletes and scientists and people that are very, very good at a very specific sports, tennis, like Roger Federer, started off doing lots of sports as kids. They played soccer, they played tennis, they were swimming, they did boxing, they skied. And so I was really blessed to have a family that sort of supported my every whim of trying different sports. And so I think that's what's made me a better athlete as an adult. And so I would say, have fun, do lots of things, don't focus, overly focus too early on one sport.
Good advice. I'm going to ask a question now that came in on the Zoom. They want to know what kinds of methods of replenishing nutrition and hydration do you use during a triathlon?
Very good question. So I work with a great company called Tailwind Endurance Nutrition. And so it's a combination of carbohydrates and electrolytes. I suffer from irritable bowel disease. It's part of my uveitis diagnosis. So 90% of uveitis patients have some sort of underlying bowel disease. And so I have a difficult time with a lot of different nutrition products. And that seems to be one that works very well and is gentle on the gut because it's glucose based. So you don't get the big sugar spikes, and it tends to be sustainable. Our races in paratriathlon are only an hour long, so you don't need a lot of calories on board per se. So one gel is usually sufficient. So I'll put the electrolytes in my water bottle, and I'll usually eat a gel with a little caffeine in it right before I get into the swim. And then if I'm not feeling awesome, maybe I'll do one. Usually if there's a multiple lap bike course, a lot of our courses are 3 laps on average. And so I'll take a gel on the second lap of the bike course to set me up for a good run. But honestly, from a nutrition standpoint, I don't necessarily need it because again, my race is that short, but that little spike of caffeine or even they say actually the placebo effect of putting sugar on your tongue while you're racing, you don't even need to swallow it per se, actually can have a benefit to performance. So that's generally what I do. And nutrition wise on a day-to-day basis, with my GI disorder, I have to be very careful. I don't do dairy generally. I do low sugar and no gluten. So I try to follow like an anti-inflammatory diet.
Okay. Next question comes in on Facebook. They would like to know, how do you manage the running part of triathlon with asthma? And are there special breathing exercises or endurance techniques that you use?
I don't do breathing exercises, though. I have read that there's some benefit to that. So it's certainly worth investigating. And so, you can Google lots of different things to improve aerobic performance. But honestly, my coach has me train lots of different aerobic systems from endurance to aerobic and anaerobic systems. And so that's either hard intervals or that's long, slow distance. And both of those things are going to help, with asthma, and controlling that is being able to sustain, that kind of effort for 5 kilometers of a sprint distance triathlon. So managing my asthma, I have a great pulmonologist and also a great coach that knows how to build me in a gradual way, because we don't want to stress my lungs out, especially right before a race, because when you're in peak fitness, you're also at the peak of being fragile with your immune system, because your immune system gets really run down when you're in heavy training. So that makes me susceptible to things like bronchitis and sinus infections. So I have to be very careful before races as far as doing very, very hard efforts to make sure that they're enough to have some gains, but not so much that I put my lungs in such a state that they need to recover immensely before a race where I'm coughing a lot.
Okay. Michelle B has asked a question on Zoom about your guide dog, and have you thought of going back to Guiding Eyes for the Blind to take part in their running guide dog program?
My politically correct answer is no. I don't think it's a safe way to, or I don't think it's good to run with a guide dog. I think it's fun, but I think it's a luxury, and it does shorten the working life of the dog. And each dog costs $50,000 to breed and train, and therefore by running with that dog, you are now costing the school $70,000 rather than $50,000, because they have to replace the dog sooner, probably at 6 years old rather than 9 or 10. So you're burning through dogs quicker. And while the dogs love it and enjoy it and it's fun and it's great for you, running for me, honestly, is a luxury, right? It's not something that I have to do. I mean, it is my job these days because I am on the national team, but it's something that I can physically do on a treadmill and I can physically do with a guide. I don't need my guide dog. His primary job is guiding me. So no, I will not be ever getting a running guide dog because their day job for me is more important. And honestly, my last dog retired at 8 years old, which was heartbreaking to have them retire so young. And I want Woodstock to be able to work until he's at least 10, ideally. He's 8 now. So running with him would definitely cause more stress on his body, and he'd have to retire sooner. So I want to keep him around for a bit.
Okay. Next question has to do with coaching. They want to know, do you have one coach for all disciplines, or what?
I do. My coach is Ken Axford. He's based in Colorado Springs. He's one of the best coaches I've worked for. He's worked with, and he's part of USA paratriathlon as well. So sometimes he travels with the team, which is how I met him initially. And what impressed me about him was he was not my coach at the time. I had another coach, and my guide and I had an issue or had some concerns when we were racing in Canada a couple of years. And he had such amazing advice and was so generous with his time and very, very supportive, even though he wasn't our coach. And he had done tons of research on our competitors and on the course, and he really had done his homework. And so that really inspired me as an athlete, that the coaches out there, they may not be your personal coach, but they want to see you succeed because they're part of USA Paratriathlon. And that really struck me. So yes, I have one coach, although I work with a master's swim group. So I have the master's swim coach that I work with every day that does our workouts. Although my coach, when I'm swimming by myself, he writes my workouts. I do, in addition, have a strength coach because the strength component is very, very important, especially as an older athlete, to prevent and deal with injuries and instabilities and weaknesses. And occasionally I check in with a swim mechanic specialist at a place called Swim Labs. They're around the country, and I highly advise anybody who's getting into the sport to invest the money in having a swim video analysis if you've got a local swim coach that's either USA Triathlon certified or is a master swim coach, to do some video analysis and then talk with you how you can improve your stroke. To keep your shoulder health is super important, to make sure your stroke mechanics are good and to set you up for success, because swimming is most technique focused of the 3 disciplines in triathlon. So making sure that you've got a good coach that maintains not only your fitness, but your technique is super important.
Okay. Next question asks about, they would like your opinion. If someone hasn't participated in triathlon or any of the 3 disciplines growing up, how difficult would it be as an adult to pick up the sport and be successful at it?
I took it up at 37. So
There you go.
it's, if I can do it, I feel like anybody can do it. And I work with a lot of visually impaired athletes. I have a camp called Camp, for those of you who can see, I have my hat on, it says "No Sight, No Limits," and it's a photo of a tandem, and "No Sight, No Limits" is also written in Braille across the brim of the hat. And so I run this camp called Camp No Sight, No Limits. And a lot of the athletes that come to me are older, in their 50s and 60s, that want to get into the sport because they read about it or heard about it, or, Challenge Athlete Foundation does a great job of recruiting athletes to the sport. Triathlon is their primary focus. And so they invite a lot of athletes out to their annual fundraiser here in San Diego to participate either as a relay or to do the whole thing. And so it's a great introduction to the sport. And there's a lot of really good grassroots paratriathlon races popping up around the country now that are para-friendly. So, I encourage you, it doesn't really matter what age you are. I actually just took on an athlete. She's 55 and she wants to do her first triathlon. So, I don't think age is an issue.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
For all you elder viewers out there. Neil Atkinson has a question. Besides the physical, you know Neil?
Yes.
Okay. Besides the physical training aspects of your sport, do you have an example of tactical thinking during a race?
Yeah, that's a great question. I work with a psychologist named Simon Marshall, and he's actually based here in San Diego. He wrote a great book called How to Calm the F Down and Rise to the And so he's married to the Xterra pro, Leslie Patterson, who's won the Xterra Off-Road World Championships seven times. So, and he's a former World Tour cycling competitive athlete. So anyway, the question was about the mental game, I guess. So how I train my mental aspect. I work a lot with Simon. I do a lot of journaling. Journaling is really helpful. I actually keep, there's a great journal for those of you who want to track your workouts called Believe Training Journal. It's by Lauren Fleshman, who's a former pro runner. and it's for runners or other athletes. And so I log all of my workouts in there. I really love writing things down. You can do it. You can also do it online as well. But I love going back and writing like things that maybe I wouldn't share with my coach, like how I really felt that day, my mood, things like that, and how the workout went. So I think it's really great, the days when you're really tough or you're doubting your fitness or doubting the process or exhausted, to go back and see your progress or see that you had a similar day a month ago and then the next day you smashed it. So to go back and see that in writing really for me is very helpful mentally. And also I surround myself mentally with a lot of people that are, I'm very selective about my core group of friends, and I'm surrounded by amazing athletes who are also moms and business owners who are very, active and go-getters. And so that positive energy tends to bleed onto me and is really helpful, because my training is very solitary. And so that can be very difficult, mentally and physically. And so, having that interaction with people that inspire me to keep moving and pushing is incredibly important. Having a good support staff is immensely important, and a good coach.
Yeah, what about like during a race? I know you probably have a strategy going into a race, but how does tactics change during a race, and how do you manage that?
Honestly, well, I mean, things happen during a race and you have to, we're adaptive athletes, you have to adapt, but like we really focus on a plan prior to the race, and Kirsten, my guide, and I speak with my coach extensively before the race, and we really try to stay on plan. Unless things happen that alter the plan, there's always plan B, C, and D, right? But we prepare for about every scenario. We prepare for flat tires. We prepare for an asthma attack on the run. We prepare for the tether breaking in the swim. We've raced together probably more than 50 times in 50 races all over the world. And so that, we've literally encountered just about every problem except for a shark, maybe. Hopefully that never happens. But, or every scenario. And so having that in my tool belt, my mental tool belt, and knowing that, okay, this has happened before, I know how to handle this. And then going through worst case scenarios. If this happens, or if I'm dead last out of the water, what's the plan? Making sure that you really stick to that plan in advance, and don't make last minute decisions that can really derail your race.
That's good advice from someone who knows. That will do it for the questions, Amy. We really want to thank you. You mentioned your role models exhibit resiliency and positive energy, and you exemplify both of those characteristics to the utmost. So thank you for sharing your positive energy with us and your insight to the sport of paratriathlon. Thanks once again. We just want to remind everybody that we're not done with triathlon today. We will have a live workout with Kyle Kuhn at 5 p.m. Eastern. So get your workout clothes on and tune in for that one. And then we'll wrap up the day with a session with USABA Executive Director Mark Lucas, talking with Jessica Beecham, who is the National Federation of the Blind's Vice President for the Colorado chapter. And they will talk about virtual programs and what each organization provides for athletes with visual impairments. So once again, thank you, Amy Dixon, for joining us this afternoon. We hope everybody enjoyed it, and we'll see everybody soon. Thanks again.
Sounds good. Make sure you guys all hydrate for that workout today. Kyle's really going to work you.
He will. Good advice.
Have fun.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.